At this time, the old Mrs. Wilson had realized that it would be difficult to reap the water. For fear that her son and grandson would be hurt again, she hurriedly said, "Charlie, you let them go, just as if we haven't been here today." Charlie shook his head. "That won't work. You are here. Why should I assume you haven't been here?" Old Mrs. Wilson tremblingly asked, "Then how can you stop?" Charlie said indifferently, "You are at the face of my father-in-law and my mother-in-law. Tell me the true purpose of your coming this time. If you are sincere enough, I will spare them and let you never come. If you are not enough sincerely, I'm sorry, I have made this order of chasing after death." Upon hearing this, Harold, who was so frightened and knelt on the ground, hurriedly cried and said, "Grandma, tell the truth. You tell Charlie the truth. Otherwise, I might be dead, Grandma." Noah Wilson was also afraid of getting angry, so he hurriedly pleaded, "Mom, just tell the truth." The old Mrs. Wilson has given up struggling this time, and sighed, like a cock that was defeated in a fight, and said, "Charlie is right. I am here this time. I really want to use a bitter trick to trick you back and take you back to Wilson Group." After finishing speaking, the old Mrs. Wilson wanted to wash white again, and blurted out, "But me." Charlie interrupted her directly and roughly, "It's nothing but, you are finished, you can go." The old Mrs. Wilson looked at him bitterly and said, "You always want me to finish speaking, I also have difficulties." Charlie said coldly, "You have no hardships, some are just bitter fruits. The bitter fruits are grown by yourself, and you can only eat them yourself." After speaking, Charlie said again, "If you guys are more acquainted, now close your mouth, pinch your tails, and roll away. This incident will have never happened, otherwise." At this point, Charlie yelled at Mr. Orville on the phone and said, "Mr. Orville, if you hear a Lady Wilson pushing me here again, immediately give Noah Wilson, Harold his son, a chase order." Mr. Orville blurted out, "Mr. Wade can rest assured, I will follow your instructions." The old Mrs. Wilson was so depressed, she nodded herself, completely accepted the failure, beckoned to several people, and said weakly, "Let's go." Noah Wilson, Harold, and Wendy, who had been silent for a while, hurriedly helped her and left the ward quickly. After they left, Jacob let out a long sigh, and said lonely, "I thought my mother finally woke up, but I didn't expect that it would be a calculation in the end." Elaine lamented, "If the Wilson Group goes down, our pensions will not be paid." Claire looked at Charlie and said softly, "Charlie, thank you, if it weren't for your reminder, I might have been fooled." Charlie smiled slightly and said, "I am your husband, what do you do with me so politely?" After speaking, Charlie said again, "In the next few days, let Dad take a good rest in the hospital for a few days. I will take care of him. You can start and open the company. Don't let the Wilson family look down on you." Claire nodded quickly and said seriously, "I know. I will definitely go all out." When Mrs. Wilson returned home, she was in a trance and almost collapsed. Who would have thought that not long ago, because of the cooperation of the Emgrand Group, she had a big banquet in the hotel, and the scenery was all the same. However, in a blink of an eye, the Wilson family was left alone and almost went bankrupt. The Emgrand Group stopped cooperating and also blocked the Wilson Group. Now, the Wilson Group has lost all cooperation and the company has no money. But at the same time, the company is also facing a large amount of capital expenditure. For example, the rents of the office buildings of the group, the salaries of all the people above and below the group, the construction costs of the project construction party, and the material costs of the material suppliers. Now, the Wilson Group is like a bag of rice with a hole in it. There was not much rice in it, but it rushed out, and it couldn't stand it anymore. What's even more annoying is that Wendy, her most beloved granddaughter, had the opportunity to marry Gerald, the son of the White family. But now, the White family has avoided the Wilson family. The last support of White family also disappeared. Thinking of this, the old Mrs. Wilson couldn't help tears. In the past few years, the old master has been in charge of housekeeping, but he did not expect that he would manage the family business in this field. If this continues, the group will not only be completely closed down but will also face huge debts. By then, even this old villa will not be kept. And all of this stems from selfishness. If it wasn't for the purpose of seizing the villa that White's family gave to Charlie, how could Jacob and Claire and their daughter break with them? If Claire hadn't left the Wilson Group, how could the Emgrand Group have turned against the Wilson Group? The eldest son, Noah Wilson, was also on the verge of collapse. The family business is at stake, his daughter loses her happiness, her son has no future, and Charlie has been repeatedly humiliating them. He now has the heart to do something to restore the decline, but he can't find any light. Wendy has been crying ever since she came back, crying heartbreakingly, and he felt uncomfortable. He couldn't help asking the old Mrs. Wilson, "Mom, is there no hope for the Wilson family in the future?" Old Mrs. Wilson shed 2 lines of muddy tears and said painfully, "There is no other way to do it. If the company does not declare bankruptcy, the subsequent debts will crush us.